We are officially, I think it's 2 weeks now, 2 weeks out from the NFL draft. It's looming ever so closely, and as the day gets closer, that we find out who the new Philadelphia Eagles are going to be, comes with the anxiety of, of wearing down these players, breaking down these players, trying to figure out who it's going to be, and preparing for heartbreak for all of our draft crushes and prospects that we've come to know and love, and watch them join other teams as well. What is going on, guys? Welcome to another edition of the EPA Podcast brought to you by Bleeding Green Nation. I'm your host today, Victor Williams. Be sure to follow me on all social media platforms at the Philly Pod, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is you've come across my stuff. Be sure to give a follow. Joined as always by my co-host on the EPA Podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at half_TPL. Be sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel. I'll let him tell you where you can find everything in his big board and his million players he's broken down. So if there's any way you've gone into this draft and you don't know every single player, at least in the top 100, then you haven't done your due diligence to the extent that Shane has. So be sure to go over there and check out his YouTube channel so you can be well equipped and not be surprised when you hear whatever name the Eagles select in the first 3 or 4 rounds. I want you to be able to hear the name called and be like, oh, I know that guy because I watched Shane's YouTube channel. So Shane, because of you, everybody's gonna know at least the top 4 players that the Eagles picked in the top 100. So good
Yeah,
on
we
you for
hope
that.
so. You never know. I mean, I was on a live draft show last year when the Patriots drafted Cole Strange, and
Yeah, that wasn't fun for
I
them
had
anyway.
him outside my top 150. So you never know what's going to happen on draft night. The Eagles might select somebody that I'd not done a video on, but let's be honest, that'll probably be the Patriots' domain again. So
Yeah, they're
feel
good.
good about the draft. I'm ready for it to get here. Like all the work has been put in. I've got a few videos left to edit. Everything's scheduled out on Twitter. I'm just ready to ride this out and get to draft night at this point.
Yeah, because especially at least at that point, you're going to know the players that are going to be here. It's time to look even deeper at those guys and figure out what they can bring in the next season, maybe in the 2023 campaign, as the Eagles attempt, I'm sure, to be playing football in February, determined to get back to a Super Bowl. So last week, if you were able to catch Shannon and I on last week's edition of the podcast, we each broke down 3 players that we suspect the Eagles could be targeting in the first round. And this week, we're going to zero in on the number 30th overall pick, talk 3 players each as far as that pick is concerned. But Shane, before we get into those targets, I want your thoughts on what is the probability of the Eagles moving out of that pick 30, whether they move back and get more second round capital because they don't have a whole lot there, or if they try to move up, if somebody, we'll talk about my guy, if somebody falls that they really like, or somebody is sliding that was in the teens and sliding to the 20s, and the Eagles may be aggressive to go and get those guys. What is your where would kind of you rank the percentage of the Eagles trading out of this pick either to acquire more capital or to move up and get a potential year 1 contributor?
I think it's highly unlikely they pick at both 10 and 30. Obviously, they've got the 2 first-round picks, and then they have a second and third, but they have no 4th, 5th, or 6th round picks. So it's a long time to sit and wait from the 3rd round to the 7th round. We know how he likes to move around and deal picks. I think it's likely they'll trade one of those picks. Now, 30 is tricky because a lot of times teams are trying to get into the back end of the first round to take a quarterback to get that 5th-year option. And I know there's been a lot of hype around Hendon Hooker going in the back of the first round, the quarterback out of Tennessee. I just don't see it. And I think it would be surprising if a team made that move up. So then it just turns to another player falling that somebody wants to get up and get. And so your return for 30 is probably less if it's not a move up for a quarterback. Like the last time the Eagles picked after a Super Bowl season at the end of the first round, they traded out to the Ravens and they picked up, I think it was a second and a future second, and the Ravens got Lamar Jackson. And I don't know if you would get the same sort of return if it's not for a quarterback, but I do think they'll try to move out of one of those picks to pick up some day 2, day 3 picks for this season. They don't really have a need for picks next year because they have so many projected picks with the comp picks, but I mean, if you could ever get another future first, that's always fun to have another team to root against next year.
Yeah, I feel like I wanted to keep the tradition going of rooting for somebody to lose so that we can keep the draft tracker going. The first mock draft I wrote last week had the Eagles trading back from 10 to 19 in a scenario where Jalen Carter was no longer available. And a lot of fans told me that they're done with kind of like acquiring picks for the next year. There's no need to do that. It's time to go all in now. And I agree with that sentiment. I was just excited to continue the draft tracker going because God forbid something goes wrong this year. you'll have another first round pick to try and rectify whatever the problem was in 2023. But we're anticipating another Super Bowl run, so maybe that's not the way to look at things. It's time to start. It's time to stop looking towards the future, prepare for the now, and try and secure that the Super Bowl ring before Jalen Hurts, whenever his extension comes, before that kicks into effect here. So if the Eagles stay at pick number 30, say they stayed at 10, they stayed at 30, in a world where Howie decides I'm going to stay at these picks and I'm going to draft the best player available there. Eagles pick at number 30. Shane, what is one guy? Let's pretend like we have somewhat of an idea of who they picked at number 10, but who are some of your favorite prospects at number 30? Who's the number one guy you're hoping is available at 30 if the Eagles stay at that pick?
Yeah, a guy that I really like at pick 30 is Osiris Torrance, the offensive guard out of Florida. Yeah, he's the top offensive guard in the class, unless you're evaluating Peter Skoronski as a guard, in which case he's obviously better. But interior offensive linemen don't tend to go high, and so you could see Torrance falling there. I've seen, for some reason, he started to fall down big boards and stuff into the second round now, and I don't really get that. He's a really good player. He was a 3-star prospect who played for 3 seasons at Louisiana Lafayette before transferring to Florida. And then in his 1 year at Florida, he was a first-team All-American at right guard. He's huge, 6'5", 330 pounds, 96th percentile wingspan, 98th percentile hand size. He only allowed 12 pressures in his first 2 seasons at Louisiana Lafayette, and then he made the leap to the SEC, and he allowed 0 sacks or hits, and he posted an 89.9 PFF run blocking grade in 2022. So he's big, he's strong, he's a stonewall in pass protection. If he does start to get pushed back, he does a really good job. You'll see sometimes offensive linemen, they just keep like chopping their feet backwards, and that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get that little hop and sink your hips to re-anchor, and he does a good job of that. He can execute reach blocks on outside runs. He can do about whatever you ask him to. The only real weakness in his game is that he's not the most fluid mover. He's a little heavy-footed, comes from his size. Maybe he cuts a little weight or whatever, but he's a plug-and-play right guard, which coincidentally, I don't know if you know this or not, Victor, but the Eagles' lone replacement to the offensive line will be whomever plays right guard. So you talk about being in a Super Bowl window and drafting a guy that you can plug in and play and not have to worry about it right guard. And I know Eagles fans are sold on Cam Jurgens being the right guard.
Sure.
I wrote in my scouting report for Cam Jurgens last year that he was a center-only prospect. So I'm not saying he couldn't make that leap. I didn't evaluate him that way. He never played at offensive guard at Nebraska. So you could get him, and that would give you that would make me feel a lot better about the offensive line. Not that I feel bad about it, but I think it would be a pick in the trenches that the Eagles would like, and he would be automatic plug and play, high impact in his first year.
Now, did you, when you, if and when, I don't know if you did this, but when you scouted Landon Dickerson, was he a center only prospect when you did him as well?
No, I think Dickerson, I have to go back and look. I'm pretty sure Landon Dickerson actually took snaps at all 5 positions when he was at Alabama at some point. Now I think he took like 12 left tackle snaps or something like that. I'll look it up when you're talking about one of your guys here in a minute. But no, I thought Dickerson was a guy that was kind of flexible. The Eagles definitely saw him as a center and moved him out to guard, but that he had played a lot of different positions in college.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe hopefully if they viewed Dickerson as center only and lucky enough he was able to play left guard, they're hoping the same for Cam Jurgens. But I feel like Jurgens was more of like a surefire center than Landon Dickerson was. So obviously with Kelsey returning now, they're going to want to try and see what Cam Jurgens can do in year 2, because most people don't want your second round picks to be sitting in their second season. But this guy you're talking about, Torrance, sold me on he'll be able to come in and start right away. I'm not sure how fans would feel about it playing him over Cam Jurgens. They're going to probably hear some uproar over that, but we know how the Eagles like to address those trenches, and we expect them to come out of the first round with either a defensive tackle or edge rusher or an offensive lineman of some sort. I'd be shocked if they don't come out of the first round with one of those three positions if they decide to address elsewhere. So that's a guy I think would be beneficial to the Eagles, especially as they attempt to play in February next season.
Real quick, so Landon Dickerson was 6'5" and 5/8.
Yeah,
333 pounds. Cam Jurgens was 6'2" and 7/8, 303 pounds. So there's quite a bit of a difference there in terms of like your athletic profile between Dickerson and Jurgens. That's not to say that Dickerson couldn't move to guard. It was just a lot more of a sure thing, I guess, with Dickerson to be able to move him around like that.
Right. I was gonna ask where you had I don't know if you mentioned it or if I just zoned out at that moment, but where did Torrance rank in your as far as your big board is concerned? What rank prospect is he?
He is the number 21 guy on my big board.
You think he's gonna be there?
I think so. Well, I don't know. It really just depends. It just takes one team. Interior offensive line usually falls down the boards a little bit. But I mean, you've seen Elijah Vera Tucker go in the teens, which he was probably a better prospect than Osiris Torrance was. And he had some tackle versatility as well. But it just takes one team needing a guard because he's the top guy, discounting Skoronski, who teams will view as kind of a tweener. But I think it's conceivable he'll be there at 30 as well.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think those guys typically tend to slide, especially if more quarterbacks are going to sneak. You're hearing 4 can go in the top 10. You're hearing Hendon Hooker. You mentioned Hendon Hooker's name is sliding around, so we're definitely going to expect some guys to slide in those regards. Interior offensive linemen do find their way. So some first round guys fall into the second and things like that, depending on where skill players are going to go. So for my first overall prospect, I like at the 30th pick in the first round. You spoke about the trenches on the offensive side. I'll flip over to the defense and pick a guy like BJ Ojelari out of LSU, a guy that I know we've talked prior to the show. Now this pick is with the notion that they weren't able to get any of the other guys like Jalen Carter or Nolan Smith is gone by now. The Van Nesses, the Brian Brezzes, all those guys. So I think BJ Ojelari is a really good consolation prize at this pick if he's the one remaining standing. Now, as we all know, the Eagles' defensive line dominated on historic levels last season, the franchise record 70 sacks, thanks to a deep rotation that kept players fresh. Now, I think with the pass rushing arsenal that Ojelari has, I think it would be enticing to Howie Roseman and a guy that likes to keep rotations anyway. It's a guy that can come in and get into the fold right away. And I really like what I see from the tape on him. I feel like he's an explosive athlete. I feel like he has really good length. I feel like he can bend the edge with really good lean. I think he's a guy that Howie will see on him. We all make fun of the high motor guys, but I think he's a high motor guy that would be enticing to Howie Roseman. 16 and a half sacks, 25.5 tackles across his 3 years at LSU, and I think that he would be a really nice rotational piece behind Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat. So Shane, for you, Ojelari, where do you have him ranked? How do you think he would fit into this defense if they're not able to get any of the other big name guys along the defensive line earlier in the draft?
Yeah, I have Ojelari just outside the first round. There's been a lot of buzz about him going into the back half of the first round. And I don't think it's a reach necessarily. I like the pick. I think it's likely he's going to sneak into the back end of the first round. I like him as a player. He's really athletic off of the edge, which is always nice. And he's really technically sound as a pass rusher. So there's not a lot of technique that you need to refine there. He is small. He's only 10th percentile weight, and he struggles on the line of scrimmage, especially as like a front side run defender. If you run the ball at him, he is willing. He's just not able
good at it
necessarily. So I think he could benefit from adding some weight, some functional strength or whatever. But if you're going to run a 3-4, if you're going to base out of a 3-man down front, and you can put him out on the edge as an outside linebacker, a pass rushing specialist, similar to what the Eagles do with Hassan Reddick. You can put him on the other side. You can have him in case of an injury to Reddick. I like Ojelari quite a bit. I wouldn't be disappointed at all if they took him at the back of the first round.
Yeah, I think he would be a good fit and definitely a year one contributor. Now, I know a lot of people scream like edge isn't an immediate need, but that's a position that you could continually add to and get production from. I know Brandon Graham is coming back, but he's 34, and they certainly need younger talent off the edge. We'll be getting Derek Barnett back. We don't know if he's going to provide more penalties or sacks at this juncture, so we're trying to figure out what kind of role he is going to have. And he comes from a good family. His brother Aziz has been productive to this point in his career with the Giants. So I think that when you can draft a guy that already has NFL ties to fairly good players, I think it's a win-win situation in both of those regards. So Ojelari is a guy I have my eye on in the back half of that draft, only if they don't look at guys like Nolan Smith or Jalen Carter and miss out on some of the bigger names earlier with their 10th overall pick. I still think you can get a good asset to add to the defensive line at the back end of that first round. So Shane, for you, say Torrance is off the board, or the Eagles just don't care about offensive line in the first round for whatever reason. They feel good about it. They're going to roll with Juergens. Who's another guy that you think the Eagles could potentially target at the back end of the first round?
Yeah, before I give my guy, I did go check that, and Landon Dickerson did play all 5 positions for Alabama. So
Dang.
he played snaps. I just confirmed he played some. He had at least a full game where he started at both left and right tackle in 2018.
Wow.
Yeah. So 60 plus at least, but I
was
didn't
screaming about the pick at the time. I was mad about it. I wanted Asante Samuel Jr. and JOK. I wanted all these guys. I was crying about it. Now look at him, Pro Bowl left guard.
Yeah, there were a lot of guys I wanted as well. So I just decided to stop criticizing the Eagles taking second round offensive linemen.
I won't. I'll cry about it every year.
Then they took Cam Juergens last year, and that upset me too. But I tried to rein that one in because I remembered the year before.
You know, now that you mention it, I was definitely less upset last year than I was the Dickerson year. Like last year, I was like, all right, well, it makes sense. Like, so maybe I'm just getting either more mature or less emotional, or maybe I'm just coping with what the Eagles do at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So another guy that I like as a potential guy at pick 30 is Keely Ringo, the defensive back out of Georgia. Now he's fallen down boards quite a bit throughout the process, and a lot of it has to do with the last time you saw him on a football field, he was getting abused by Marvin Harrison Jr., which, let's be honest, there are very few cornerbacks in the NCAA that wouldn't get burned by Marvin Harrison Jr. There's a lot of cornerbacks in the NFL that would as well. So I think there's a little bit of an overreaction to the last thing we saw. He comes from a track background. He's got fantastic speed, ran a 4.3640 at the combine, which is 92nd percentile. Overall, he had an 8.24 relative athletic score. He's big, 90th percentile for a corner height, 93rd percentile weight. So big, elite straight line speed. I think he does a good job at pressing at the line of scrimmage and then carrying vertically and cutting off in breaking routes from a trail technique. So he gets that jam, then he sinks onto the inside hip, and he's so long, he just gives such small throwing windows. I think he does a good job at high pointing the ball. At the catch point, he's good in zone coverage. He hits his landmarks in zone. He relates well to high-low concepts while keeping his eyes on the quarterback. But obviously there's some weaknesses in his game because that all sounds pretty good. He doesn't have the best agility. He's got good straight line speed, but his change of directions are slow. He loses too much speed in and out of his transitions. Some of that comes from being so big, it's hard for him to sink his hips and move fluidly. There's an element of that. He also struggles when he has to play with his back to the ball. So in man coverage, once you get that jam and you're running with the guy, you're back to the quarterback, he struggles to sense the ball, sense the throw. He only got a hand on 10% of the passes that targeted him last season. And he's also susceptible to big moves or big plays off of like double moves. He allowed 13 catches of over 15 yards this year, which was the second most in the SEC. So
Trayvon Diggs, dude.
Yeah, he's a big play guy. I think his best fit at the next level is going to be an outside corner in like a cover 3 zone scheme where he's responsible for that deep zone. So he's able to sink off and keep his eyes on the quarterback. He's best with his eyes facing the quarterback. I also think he didn't do this in college. I feel like if corner doesn't work out very well, he's the type of guy that could translate to safety well, because then he gets to keep his eyes in the backfield. He gets to come downhill and hit guys. And I think that's where he can thrive. It would take some of the stress off of him and the transitions out of cuts and things like that. So I like Keely Ringo. He's fallen a lot more than I think he should. If he was there at pick 30, he's not an exact fit for the type of scheme the Eagles are going to run, where I think he should be more of a cover 3 sort of corner. But at that point, I think you roll the dice on the elite speed and length, and you see if you can make it work out. So I like Keely Ringo more than a lot of people do. I feel like would be pretty happy with him at 30 as well.
Yeah, Ringo is a guy I feel like doesn't kind of get the credit he deserves. Like the drop, to your point, is very surprising to me. I didn't expect him to drop as much. I think his physicality and his run support are underrated, but I understand that his consistency at coverage as well as the route recognition is kind of what the scouts and people evaluating his talent are looking at. And I remember I put out a post not too long ago about Jalen Carter at 10, Ringo at 30, like is the whole Georgia defense basically getting back together in Philadelphia. And a lot of fans were like, don't like Ringo, blah, blah, he got burned, he's getting cooked all the time. But again, I think it's recency bias because of what they just witnessed in the last game of his collegiate career. I think Ringo has a lot of traits that people should covet, especially defenses, to your point, with zone schemes and such. 6'2" at good size, 210 pounds. To your point, even though he allowed and got beat on a lot of those double moves, he did allow just one touchdown on 545 coverage snaps. So he wasn't letting people score. At least he was getting beat, but he was making the tackle, or people were helping him out. So at least he was keeping people out of the end zone. And that 4.36 speed at the combine is elite. Like, you can do a lot with that. The change of direction is where he's going to have to try and figure it out. But when you have that kind of speed, you're at least going to be able to keep up with receivers, and then you can always tell people how to develop a ball recognition in the air and how to get to the catch point and things like that. I think he has very good traits. I would feel a lot more encouraged about making that pick if Denard Wilson was still here. I don't know who's going to be coaching these. Do we know who's coaching the DBs now? I don't think we do.
So. I'm not honestly sure.
Yeah, I don't know either, but we'll see how Sean decides going to deploy these guys. And I think why Ringo makes even more sense is that while he's developing, he's a guy that the Eagles don't need immediate help at corner this year, and maybe not even next year, depending on how healthy Bradbury and Slay remain. You still have Greedy Williams, who they're hoping to get something out of. So it's not like you draft Ringo and you hope that he can go out there and cover guys like Mike Evans and guys like that right from the jump, and Terry McLaurin's and CeeDee Lamb's. You're not going to expect him to go out there and do that right from the jump. He'll be able to develop behind proven veterans, behind very good Pro Bowl corners. And by the time Slay and Bradbury are out of here, or whatever the situation is, I think Keely Ringo will be in a good spot to step in and produce at that level, so they can take their time with him. He's a very good talent, and I think that he's the perfect talent to develop behind these guys. I like a lot of the things I see from Keely Ringo.
DK McDonald is the assistant defensive backs coach, and currently there is no defensive backs coach listed on the Eagles website. So
yes,
I guess
who's teaching
he's the de facto defensive backs coach for now.
It's Darius Slay, James Bradbury. They're the coaches right now. But I'm all about Georgia defense regardless. Like we've mentioned a number of times as a joke, Alabama players on offense, Georgia players on defense. I'm not going to complain. If you can get Ringo and one of Carter and Nolan Smith, I would be all about it. But from a strictly talent standpoint, I understand the concerns with Ringo's game, but I think the pros outweigh the cons when you talk about strictly talent with him.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So my second guy, I knew that we weren't going to do this before. We talked prior to last week's episode, and we talked about this guy, and we didn't think that he's going to be here at 30. But I can't get out of one of these two episodes without talking about him, because he's literally that good, and maybe we'll get lucky and he falls, because he's the best safety talent in the draft, and that is Brian Branch. We just talked about Alabama players on offense, but this is one of the guys on defense that I think would fit everything that the Eagles, it literally fills a need. If the Eagles trade back from 10 or he falls to 30, whatever the situation is, I think this guy should be the target for the Eagles. Now, I understand that in their 90-year history, the Eagles have never taken a safety in the first round. So why is this year going to break that streak? Well, it's because Brian Branch, I feels like, will replace, or it brings a lot of the same things that CJ Gardner-Johnson did. I know Terrell Edmonds is here and Justin Evans and all these other guys that they're hoping can kind of figure it out. But I feel like if you bring in Brian Branch, Edmonds, and Reed Blankenship gives you a really solid safety depth chart. I feel like that gives you three really solid guys that you can figure out who's going to play deep, who's going to be kind of in the box as that strong safety, and try to figure things out. Brian Branch had 14 tackles for loss in 2022. That was the most by Alabama defensive back in the Nick Saban era. And I think he basically can align at any spot on the field, depending how Sean decides is going to do it. He can line up anywhere. You can play in the slot. He can play deep safety. He can play strong safety. I feel like his football IQ, his athleticism, his range to get to any spot on the field, and he's a very good tackler. I feel like people don't talk about how good this man is as a tackler. Like, watch his tape. This man is wrapping up. He's not missing many tackles. I just feels like from a obvious need. I mean, we can debate about what the Eagles truly need on defense, but this is an obvious need that I think the Eagles can fill. They weren't able to wrap up CJ Gardner-Johnson, a young, promising safety. Then you go out and get a guy like Brian Branch. You at least have him cost controlled for the next 4 or 5 years with the 5th-year option, since he's a first-round pick, and you go from there. I really like a lot of the things I see. People say he's the best safety prospect in recent memory. Now, I was really big on Kyle Hamilton last year, so I'd have to compare kind of those two in my evaluations. But I really like what I see from Brian Branch and everything he did for Alabama last season. And he probably won't be there at 30. Let me preface that with that. But I had to talk about him and just pray that he might fall.
Yeah, he had the lowest missed tackle rate among players with 90 plus tackles this year.
Exactly.
So he's an incredible tackler. Very disruptive as a blitzer. If you wanted to use him that way, he can easily carry tight ends up the seam. And you might ask, why would a safety be carrying a tight end up the seam? Shouldn't he already be up high? But he actually took 76% of his snaps in the slot at Alabama. So Alabama moved him around a lot. He took 21% of his snaps in the box. Actually, he took very few snaps aligned as a deep safety. So he's kind of a move piece. There's a lot of versatility, which is a good and a bad thing. You mentioned Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, another guy that was similar to that, who I was very high on too, and he fell out of the first round entirely because a lot of times, like, if you have one guy like that and you build your defense around moving him around, doing different things, and you don't have a backup for that guy, it screws your whole defense over if he goes down. So sometimes those guys fall. Sometimes defenses don't want to have to use, get creative. They just want a guy that we can plug him in at deep safety. We can plug him in at slot. And so maybe Branch starts to fall a little bit. Although I think the absolute floor for Brian Branch is 25 to the New York Giants. Like, this is a guy Wink Martindale would love. He's a good blitzer. He's good in coverage up the seams. Like, he's everything that the Giants would want. So
they let Julian Love walk too, didn't they? Julian Love just walked.
Yeah, I think so. So I have a hard time envisioning him getting to 30. But he's worth talking about because in a trade down or a trade up situation, trade down from 10, trade up from 30, I would love the Brian Branch pick. I think he solves a big problem for the Eagles defense.
Yeah, he matches up well with pass catching tight ends. I think he keeps up with speedy slots that come running out. I think he can. I've yet to see him not be able to cover somebody. It's hard to find weaknesses in this game, but I think the one weakness, I wouldn't even call it a weakness, but the one thing I realized when I was watching a lot of his tape, and I was like, damn, a lot of these things are out of the slot. As he mentioned, 76%. I was like, yo, they don't line him up too many other spots. So he was really effective out of the slot, but I can't help but compare him to guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick and the versatility that he brings. And if Sean Desai's defense is going to be similarly to that of Jonathan Gannon, we know how much they value versatile guys and defensive backs. And man, you plug him in, like I said, you got the veteran Edmonds, and you have the promising Reed Blankenship, who showed some good things last season. I think that gives you a solid safety group that you can depend on. And I would be very intrigued to see what he can do in this defense, because I feel like he's far and away the better side. I know there's Antonio Johnson's and the other guys, but man, I feel like if you're not able to get Brian Branson, it's a steep drop off to the next few guys. And he's a guy I've fallen in love with. He's a guy that I'm prepared to watch him play for someone else, because the Eagles don't take safeties in the first round. But it would have been disrespectful to him in Alabama and Nick Saban and the things that he was able to do for them for last season. So before we go to break, I will be fair to the other safeties in this class. Shane, if Brian Branch isn't there and the Eagles do want a safety at number 30, who's another guy that you would recommend they look at?
I talked about potentially moving Ringo to safety, but another guy would be Antonio Johnson.
Yeah, he's the next favorite.
Yeah, I've got him with the second round grade. Antonio Johnson out of Florida, out of Texas A&M. Not Florida State, somebody else out of Florida State, but Antonio Johnson out of Texas A&M. I think he's physical coming downhill. He's a really good tackler, can carry tight ends up the seam, running backs into the flat, but you're mostly going to want him as a zone defender. He's versatile too. He played deep. He actually played more deep than Branch did. He also played in the box and in the slot, but he still majored in the slot about 50% of his snaps. He doesn't have the ball skills that Branch does, and he's not the most fluid mover, but it's the same sort of thing. He's a versatile guy that you could move around to different places. I also like Sidney Brown, who's a safety out of Illinois. I've got him a little further back, but still with a second round grade. And the same sort of thing. He's really versatile, played deep in the box, in the slot over his 3 years at Illinois. And he's a really good athlete. He's a better athlete than either of those other two guys. So there's some options there for sure if you want to get into the second round and look at safeties there.
Yeah. You mentioned Florida State. I thought you were going to bring up Jamie Robinson, who's a guy who I think he probably goes in the second as well. He's another solid tackler. I'd probably have him as the second best tackler to Brian Branch, a 200+ pound guy who they'll love to throw around. He can get in the box and be physical with guys. So I think he goes early on day 2 as well. So those are some of the other safety options if or when actually Ryan Branch is not available. Let's the Eagles shock us and trade back and trade up or whatever the situation is. But I'm in love with Brian Branch. He is my one of my big draft crushes. Does a lot of things well and would just fit like a glove on everything that the Eagles kind of need in this defense. Not to say I'm not confident in Edmonds and Reed Blankenship, but he would come in here and just add another dimension to the safety room. So I'd be very excited if the Eagles were able to pull that off. Shane, we'll go to a quick break here. When we come back, we'll break down our last guys that we like. Shane has one guy. I have one more guy on offense that I think would take this offense to new heights. So we'll go to a quick break and then we'll be right back. Thank you guys for listening to the EPA podcast right here on Bleeding Green Nation.
And we are back here on the EPA podcast, breaking down 6 guys that we think could be good fits for the Eagles at pick 30. So far, I've talked about offensive guard Osiris Torrance and defensive back Keely Ringo. Victor has talked about defensive back Brian Branch and edge rusher BJ Ojelari. We each have one guy left, and I will kick us off here with my next guy. It is another position the Eagles historically don't draft ever, much less in the first round, but it's Drew Sanders, the linebacker out of Arkansas. He was a 5-star prospect coming out of high school who played quarterback and wide receiver and linebacker in high school. He spent 2 years at Alabama, mostly as an edge rusher before he transferred to Arkansas for 2022, and they moved him to off-ball linebacker. And he is huge. He's 6'4", which is 96th percentile height for a linebacker. He ran a 4.59 40 at his pro day. He didn't run at the combine. And he had a 9.28 relative athletic score. So a really athletic guy. This season, he had 103 tackles, 13.5 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, 1 interception, 5 passes defensed, 3 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, and he had 39 pressures. He's kind of a unicorn athlete. Like he has a rare combination of length and explosiveness. He's basically like Hassan Reddick explosiveness and weight, but 4 inches taller. So he could probably add some weight, and I'll get to that in a second at the next level, but he's a really fluid mover in space. He's an excellent pass rusher. I mean, he played edge at Alabama. He's got pass rush moves. Arkansas used him a lot as a blitzer through the A-gap between the center and the guard from his linebacker position. And I thought he showed really good instincts in zone coverage for a guy that has been an edge rusher for 2 years and just made the move to linebacker. So it's encouraging that although he's not a finished product, he showed some instincts there because you would project that he can grow as a zone defender. Now, he struggles to diagnose run plays and get off of blocks and traffic at times. And again, that's his edge rusher background. He wasn't used to having to diagnose it. He was used to just, setting the edge, whatever. And so he's still new to that. He plays upright at times and loses leverage when he gets hit by a tackle. And he doesn't break down very well as a tackler. He missed 22 tackles in 2022. But if he squares you up, he does hit you hard. He's a hard hitter. So Eagles fans would like that. I do think he's going to need to add mass to play in the box the next level. He's only 33rd percentile weight. He's a guy that would be really interesting in that if the Eagles want to blitz more than they did last year, which we'll see. I don't know what Sean Desai wants to do. If they want to blitz more, he's an excellent blitzer from the linebacker position. If you don't want to do that, this may not be your guy. I mean, he's really athletic. He might develop into a pretty good cover guy, but he's so good at rushing the passer. In a nightmare scenario where you lost Hassan Reddick, he could step into that Sam linebacker, primary pass rusher off the edge role. He would give you good size on the interior where you're going to probably have Nakobe Dean, who is undersized. And so I think there's a lot of pros for Drew Sanders. Now, I don't know that the Eagles would consider taking a linebacker in the first round, but if they would, this is really the only guy that I think is worth that pick. And I would love to see him in midnight green, just sort of wrecking havoc. Think of the blitzes they could draw up with Sanders and Hassan Reddick next to each other. It would be kind of interesting to watch.
Yeah, that sounds like it would certainly be a force. He and the Kobe Dean in the middle of that defense. I think that's a lot of talent there that
Which,
Eagles
by the
fans
way,
should be
Nakobe
excited
Dean,
about.
also a really good blitzer. So you would have three
Ooh.
linebackers on the field that you could conceivably blitz, and just the creativity, the things you could come up with off of that would be really scary.
Behind the presumed dominant defensive line, yeah, that's gonna be scary. As QBs would have to get real acclimated with the ground because they'd be on be on the ground quite a lot. I know we brought in Nicholas Morrow. That's a guy who, the veteran guy, similarly to Terrell Edmonds. You don't know what he's going to give you, but it's good for veteran leadership. But a guy like that, I'd definitely be excited to see in this defense. The more young talent they have, the better. The more blitzing, the better. We're hoping we're going to see more of that with Sean Desai at the helm. So from one position that the Eagles likely won't address in the first round to another is running back. Now, I know the apple of everyone's eye is clearly Bijan Robinson. They're saying he's the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley, and he can transform an offense. And the thought of him in a high-powered offense with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, you'd be able to win all your games 56-49. It wouldn't even matter what the defense looks like because you would just run up and down the field all day long. And I understand that. But the likelihood of the Eagles investing not only a first-round resource, a top 10 resource in a running back is not going to happen. And maybe they'll shock you this year. Maybe they shock the world. I don't foresee it happening. Shane, I'm sure you don't foresee it happening. But man, if it does, I'm sure we could complain about it, but I think the excitement would supersede that. But if Bijan is not the guy they go after and they decide they want another offensive weapon with the first-round pick, I think Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama would be a very, very, very nice pick. Now, Rashad Penny is here. We don't know what the durability is going to look like. He says his goal this year is to play in every game. I'm sure that sounds nice on paper, but the track record isn't there to back it up.
I would hope that's his goal.
It should be every player's goal. It should be so for him.
I don't ever want to hear a free agent signing be like, yeah, my goal is to play in 8 games this year.
I want to play in 12 games. Let's hope I can stay upright for 12 games. That's my goal. But maybe some players want baby steps. He's yet to surpass 10 games in the last 4 years. So maybe he's like, this year I'll play 10, next year I'll play 14. But he's gonna try and play all of them. So we'll see if that happens. But if you add Jahmyr Gibbs to this offense with his 4.36 speed, this man has elite athleticism as well as explosiveness, and I think vision also, because we can have the argument about Miles Sanders' vision and if he ever had it behind this offensive line. But I think the understated part of his game is the run blocking, or the pass blocking rather. I think he's a underrated pass protector. I don't think a lot of backs right now on the roster provide very good pass protection, and the primary goal should be to keep your soon-to-be $200 million quarterback upright. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs offers a lot as a pass protector. But aside from that, elite burst in the open field, above average receiving threat, I think that you can do a lot of things with Jahmyr Gibbs in this offense. I know we have Kenneth Gainwell, and a lot of fans are excited about that. The Eagles say they're excited about Trey Sermon and what he can do. So maybe running back isn't going to be the priority. But when you ask, people inside NFL circles, they're saying running back is on the minds of that front office. And if they want a true home run hitter, they want to add a true home run hitter to this offense in addition to all the other playmakers, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a solid choice.
Yeah. What did you say about him as a pass protector? Did you say you liked him or didn't like him as a pass protector?
I like him as a pass protector. I think he's above average. I don't think he's like this elite, like Stonewall. I think he's above average. That's the phrase I'll use.
Okay. Yeah. See, I thought he kind of struggled in pass protection.
Oh.
And some of that size related. At 5'9", it's hard to be a great pass protector.
I'll say this. He's better than the current backs on the roster. I'll say that. Well, I haven't watched Rashad Penny a whole lot as a pass protector, so maybe I should watch more. But he's better than Gainwell, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's okay. Penny is, but Seattle started bringing in other guys to pass protect. Some of that might be durability related as well. But it's crazy because Gainwell was a good pass protector in college and it's just never shown up in the NFL. Like I remember the clip that went viral of him decleating Cowboys linebacker Micah Parsons after. Yeah, because they were same draft, I think. And after the Eagles drafted Gainwell, that clip went viral on Twitter of him decleating Micah Parsons. But
you never saw that at pro level, so
yeah, we never did. I really like Jahmyr Gibbs. He would be exciting in the Eagles offense. I don't think he's necessarily like the best fit for the Eagles. And I'm a little bit on an island when I say that, because a lot of people really like Gibbs to Philadelphia. I think his best quality, though, is his receiving ability. I mean, he runs routes really well. He separates. He's got elite yak ability. He had 25 receptions of over 15 yards in his career. He had 39 forced missed tackles on receptions, only 2 drops on 103 passes. He's a really good receiver. The Eagles just don't throw to running backs a lot.
Yeah, nope.
Like, you think about the screen game. They love the screen game to Dallas Goedert. That's their go-to. And so you're not going to throw a lot of running back screens. Jalen Hurts doesn't throw a lot of checkdowns, and nor do a lot of mobile quarterbacks. And you could argue
he is
maybe,
the checkdown. Hurts running is the checkdown.
Right. And you could argue maybe you'd like him to stay in the pocket and just hit those checkdowns. And there's a balance there. But for the most part, I want my mobile quarterback that can outrun the defensive end to outrun him and look for a big play. So if you're not going to use him a ton in the receiving game, then I question how good of a value he is as a pick. I like the player. And if he was there, in the second round, which I don't think he will be, definitely not where the Eagles are picking, I would love it. I think he's going to end up going higher than I would value him on the Eagles just because of the lack of throwing to running backs. And, he's undersized, and that shows up in short yardage situations. Not that that's a big deal because Jalen Hurts is the Eagles' short yardage back. So I like Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm a little cooler on the fit than anybody else I've talked to that's an Eagles person, but that's kind of my perspective on Gibbs. Like the player, just not sure he would be worth the value for the Eagles, given how much they would use him in the passing game.
Yeah, and I think fans just want to add a playmaker regardless of what his really schematic fit is. So I think that's what it is also. And to your point, the pass catching ability is useful, and I think it would make more sense if Kenneth Gainwell wasn't on the roster already, who's fairly good at catching the ball himself. So do you want 2 guys in the backfield with similar skill sets? You kind of want a counterpart to Gainwell in the power game, which is why they got Rashad Penny. I fell in love with his home run hitting speed, and I thought he was half decent at pass protecting. And I was like, the Eagles could use that, which is why I zoned in on him. But some other runners, I know we both are very, very feel strongly about Zach Charbonnet. You have Deuce Vaughn out there, Tank Bigsby, and some other names. So if let's say we're past the second round, we're getting into mid-round picks now, and some of these other runners are available, who would you say after Gibbs and Bijan Robinson? And I guess I'll take Zach Charbonnet off the list because we've talked about him a lot, and we already know that he's pretty much a bowling ball on offense. What are some other mid-round runners that you think would be better served in this Eagles offense rather than Jahmyr Gibbs?
Tank Bigsby is my number 4 running back. I've got a 3rd round grade on him. He's more that fit that I like for the Eagles. He's a north-south runner. He almost always falls forward. He's powerful.
He's not falling backwards, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's not explosive speed. He's slightly below average speed. Like, he ran a 4.58 40, which is 40th percentile. But his 10-yard split was 70th percentile. So he's got burst, just not elite speed. But, I think it's worth mentioning that we always salivate over 4.3 running backs, but running back is one of the positions where athleticism correlates least to success in the league. So I don't think it's as huge of a deal. Now he's got inconsistencies, and that's why I don't have him in a, top 2 round grade. But I really like Bigsby. If you want more of like the scat back type guy, Tajay Spears out of Tulane is an interesting option. Devon A-Chain, which I think he's going to go higher because of that 4.32 speed. But there's some guys out there for sure. I think that's a good year to need a running back because I think there's a lot of them that can be had in the 2nd and 3rd day of the draft.
Yeah, as long as we stay away from the small woods and the who's the one back we took that never saw the field that was super, super productive?
Donnell Pumphrey.
Yeah. What a shame. I was gonna say, to your point, you mentioned the falling in love with the 4.3 speed. I was going to say, how often do backs get to hit that top speed? Because, it takes a little bit you have to accelerate and get past defenders to that. It's not very often you're going to see 4.3 speed in the backfield. So that's that was my point there. I do want to ask, I know when we were surveying your big board last week and you were like, Kendre Miller isn't even properly ranked in my running backs. I'm somewhat a Kendre Miller fan, but I think that's because I watched a lot of them over the college year last year, probably because I bet on him a ton. But what about Kendre Miller? Don't you like to the point where he's not even catching your eye at this point?
Yeah, I mean, he's just I've got it. There's a big clump of guys that I have kind of a day 3 grade on, and once you get to day 3, I don't venture too far into day 3 like ranking guys. But yeah, I would have no problem with Kendre Miller. He's got some upside. So I don't have anything against him. He didn't make it into like a top 3 round grade for me. and I got tired of writing reports and ranking guys I had day 3 picks on. So
yeah, it doesn't matter. They're all the same at that point. Yeah, they all kind of offer the same. I remember talking to you about, and I was like, dang, no Kendrick Miller. You're like, nope, he's not on this list. I was like, dang, I kind of like the guy, but maybe it's because I'm biased and I watched a whole lot of them with that TCU, right? TCU offense last year.
Yeah, TCU.
Yeah, I remember watching him a ton with, especially all the way up to the to the championship game. So those are our top 3 guys. I like Brian Branch. I'm sure a lot of us like Brian Branch. BJ Ojelari as a respectable pick that makes sense at number 30, and of course Jahmyr Gibbs as another playmaker added to this Eagles offense. Don't think the Eagles do it. I think they're pretty content with the way things look on offense right now. I think they will add a runner at some point, maybe not in the first round, but I do like what I see from Jahmyr Gibbs a lot. And then Shane, run through your guys one more time before we get out of here.
Yeah, I had Osiris Torrance, the offensive guard out of Florida.
The non-sexy pick.
The non-sexy pick. Yeah, don't tell him that. And then I had Keely Ringo, defensive back out of Georgia, cornerback, maybe safety, versatile. And then my third one was Drew Sanders, the linebacker out of Arkansas.
Very good, guys. Very good picks there. Very good picks. It's going to be an interesting draft. I feel like this is going to be one of the more unpredictable drafts. Aside from the first 2 picks, we all know it's going to be Young and Stroud, depending on which way. Or Anthony Richardson. Apparently, he's made his way back to the top of boards again. And Will Levis is surpassing Richardson. Like apparently to the Colts, they like Will Levis more than Richardson. So this is going to be a very, very interesting draft, and we'll see how the board kind of falls for the Eagles, because if Jalen Carter is off the board and Peter Skoronski is off the board and Devin Witherspoon is off the board, you kind of got to take Bijan at that point. What do you do? What do you do if those 3 guys are off the board? What do you do, if Skoronski, Jalen Carter, and Devin Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez are all off the board, and Bijan is there? You have to. No.
Nah. Miles Murphy, Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, I forgot you're Miles Murphy.
There's other guys. Trade back. I mean, there's a lot of options there, but I don't think. Whispers into the microphone. I don't think Bijan Robinson's making it to 10.
Yeah. I don't even what? Damn.
We're spending a lot of time talking about Eagles fans. Will the Eagles take Bijan at 10? I don't even think he's going to make it there. I don't think he makes it past the Falcons at 8. I think he's a future Atlanta Falcon.
I saw you tweeting. Yeah, he would be nice with Drake London and Kyle Pitts and those boys. I saw you tweeting about Miles Murphy. I think it was yesterday. And I was about to respond and be like, really pushing this Miles Murphy narrative, really trying to make this happen. Miles Murphy is the guy that we walk away with. I would be less than enthused, but you've swayed me on why he would be effective. If all those guys are off the board and Bijan is there and they trade back and take Miles Murphy or just draft them outright, it's gonna be a lot of upset Eagles fans. I'm telling you, it's gonna be a lot of fans say you didn't take BPA, you took need and all those things. But I feel like this is going to be the year where Howie saw what the Eagles did last year. And maybe he goes for the home run shots and says, I'm going to win a ring this year by come hell or high water. I don't care what the value is. I don't care what the history is. I'm just going to take some of these players. So we'll see what it is that Howie Roseman does. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this episode of the EPA podcast brought to you by BGN Radio, Bleeding Green Nation. Be sure to follow me on all social media platforms at the Philly Pod. Shane, let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter. If you haven't found his YouTube yet, he does post clips of his stuff on Twitter. So if you come across that, it'll be easier to find his YouTube, and so on and so forth. So Shane, let the people know where they can find that and research up on their guys in these last few weeks before the draft kicks off at the end of the month.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL every Monday through Saturday from now till the 22nd. I've got clips going out about 5 different players every day. I'm working my way up my big board. So we're into the 30s now. In fact, just a couple minutes ago, the Drew Sanders video popped off. So you can go watch those. You can follow me on YouTube at Shane Haff NFL. You can check out my podcast, Chalk Talk, which is a little dead right now, but we'll pick up after the draft with some more original content covering like all the NFL, not just the Eagles. So it comes from an Eagles perspective, but we talk about the whole NFL. So you can check out all of that stuff, and links to all that stuff is in my link tree. It's also posted on the videos that are posting out on Twitter throughout the day. So go check those out.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned about your other show that's kind of dead. Mine hasn't seen an upload since the other podcast, the Philly Pod, that the people are used to hearing me on, and people are asking me when a new one is coming that they should be listening to me on BGN Radio anyway. But my last upload was February 20th. So that show, for those of you waiting for me to upload something into that feed, it will be here after the draft. There's no sense in me coming on here and talking and then repeating the same stuff on another pod feed. It doesn't make sense, which is why I've been focusing on BGN during draft season, and then after, when the draft comes and all that stuff, the Philly pod will be back on. So it's funny that yours is kind of dead because mine is definitely hanging on 2 months. I'll be shocked if I still have subscribers come after that show. So that's funny.
That's where mine's at. Like I told people that last year I did all of the draft ranking shows I'm doing for BGN this year for Chalk Talk. And so this year I just basically told people like I'm doing it for BGN this year. So go listen to him there, and the show's not dead. As soon as the draft is over, I'll pick up doing different stuff, but it's just the content's here for now.
Yeah, it's hiatus. Yeah. Now I really felt bad about like the other show, but now I don't feel as bad because it's a recurring theme with you too. So all right, we can grieve in that together. For the people that have listened this long into the show, Shane's because I don't well, we'll see what we end to do. But are you able to give me a spoiler on who the number one player is on your big board?
Ooh, number one spoiler.
Number one. Yeah. For the people, you got to reward the people for sticking around this long.
Yeah, it won't be a surprise. Probably to people. It's pretty chalky. It's Will Anderson.
Oh,
yeah. Will Anderson comes in as the number one guy on my big board. So
over the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
What?
He's
I thought it was Bryce.
One of 3 blue chip prospects, and I've got him over any of the quarterbacks.
Where do you have? Well, now I'm just getting into the whole thing. I'll wait for that to come. I was going to say, where do you have Jalen Carter on that list? Should the Eagles run to the? We always say run to the podium, even though we said last episode that's not even a real life scenario to begin with.
Yeah, he's up there. We'll say he's up there quite high.
We won't break the whole list. We won't break the whole list. Gotta listen to that. So I think what we'll do next week is we'll come in, and I don't want to say like we'll do like 3 second rounds or 3 third rounds. So I think I'll do 3 of our favorite day 2 prospects at that point. We'll kind of meld all the rounds. We'll do 3 of our day 2s. That'll be our last episode before the draft. And then we'll decide on what we're going to do for BGN afterwards, because our other shows do have to survive at some point. So we'll figure that out. So appreciate you guys for listening to this edition as we talked about our favorite picks at number 30. Next week, we'll come up here and we'll talk about 3 of our favorite day 2 prospects, whether it be second round, third round, whatever the case is. But we'll keep the coverage coming, leading us all the way up into the NFL draft. And then we'll have more solidified players to talk about, players that will be Philadelphia Eagles. That'll be very excited to talk about. So appreciate you guys for tuning into this. Be sure to subscribe to BGN Radio on all pod platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, whatever it is you get your shows. Be sure to subscribe, leave those reviews. I saw some very nice ones recently, especially about Shane. He's killing it. So be sure to listen to all his other shows. You're on another draft show, right? I don't know how many shows you're on this feed anymore. So.
Yeah. I do the BGN draft show. So we've got the only position group we have left right now is linebackers. We'll air linebackers next week, and then on draft week, we're going to come back and do a My Guys podcast where basically there's 3 of us on the show, and we're going to find where every spot that one of us is like significantly higher or lower than the other 2, we're going to make them defend their position on those guys, why they're so low or so high. So that should be a fun one too.
Oh, that's spicy. Be sure to stay tuned on BGN Radio so you don't miss those kind of shows. We'll be back with you guys next week talking day 2 prospects. Appreciate you guys. We'll catch you on the next one.